Yes. Okay. Okay, I will share the screen right now. I have two slides with a theme for the day taken from the passages pertaining to the chapters that we are going to deal today. The first one, thus says the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches, but let him that glorieth glory in this. That is Jeremiah chapter 9, 23 to 24. Actually, this is a passage that I taken from Google Images. Unfortunately, the last sentence is not complete. So it will be like this. In NRSV, do not let the wise boast in their wisdom. Do not let the mighty boast in their might. Do not let the wealthy boast in their wealth, but let those who boast in this, that they understand and know me, that I am the Lord. I act with steadfast love, justice, righteousness in the earth. For these things I delight, says the Lord. We come across three great covenantal terms in verse 24. Steadfast love, Hesed. Hesed, Mishpat, and Emudah. Okay. So, Tzedekah. Sorry, Tzedekah. Steadfast love, Hesed, justice, Mishpah, and righteousness, Tzedekah. The three covenantal terms are repeated in chapter 9, 24. The next is from where we will be dealing in a few minutes' time. That is 7, chapter 7, verse 27. So you will tell them this, but they will not listen to you. You will call them, but they will not answer you. Then you are to say to them, this is the nation that will neither listen to the voice of Yahweh its God, nor take correction. Sincerity is no more. It has vanished from their mouths. This will be the immediate theme of what we are going to deal in the coming few minutes. Okay, let's situate ourselves. We were with chapter 7, the so-called temple sermon. This sermon is so important for Jeremiah and people who listen to Jeremiah. This is considered as the most important part of the first section, the long section. The real, the crux of the temple sermon is dealt in chapter 7, 1 to 15, maybe the original actual words of the prophet at that particular situation. And chapter 7, 16 and following come under the title called the supplement, because they were, in all probability, uttered at a later time by the prophet. So we call that as a supplement to the sermon, chapter 7, 16 to chapter 8, verse 3. These are accusations. I will go quickly because we already saw most of it. There are accusations about abuses in worship and unacceptable religious practices. A shocking statement from the prophet. Do not pray for these people. An ordinary, God-fearing reader of the Bible is shocked by this statement. Do not pray for these people. But you should remember that these are prophetic parables to convey a strong message. Why should not the prophet pray for the people? Because they have abandoned Yahweh, embracing the Mesopotamian goddess of fertility. So this section is placed in the context of the widespread idolatrous practices going on in the streets of Jerusalem and other cities of Judah. If you quickly look at chapter 7, 17 to 18, we will find that the entire family participates in the worship of pagan deities. Quickly, I spoke about the Queen of Heaven in the last class, but I had not given the slide. I have sent the slide in the last. After the class, I sent the slide when I sent the PPT, but I will go through it once again. Okay, so family, the children, their parents, they all work together. They all become participants of pagan worship. The cultic practice narrated in 7:18 might refer to a pagan cult practiced in several Jewish homes, in which the whole family would offer ash cakes in fire to goddess Ishtar. Please pay attention to this deity, because this is not the only place in the prophetic literature that this goddess Ishtar is mentioned. She will appear in different places, sometimes in different names, in different contexts, but always as a temptation, as a threat to the monotheism and the fidelity of Israel towards their God. This goddess Ishtar was referred to in different cultures by different names. See, as you see in this slide, she was worshipped in Egypt, Ugarit, Hittite, and in the land of Canaan. And that's not the end. We'll see him. We'll see this goddess in different other places. What's she famous for? Three things. She is the goddess of love, sexuality, and war. So this Ishtar, the term Ishtar, is an Akkadian term. When it is used in Greek, her name would be Astarte or Astarte. This person is assimilated with the Egyptian deities Isis, and Hathor, a goddess of the sky and of women. In the Greco-Roman world, she is called, or she is connected with the Aphrodite or Artemis and Okay. Even in our modern culture, which has entered through the influence of Western media, how some places the celebration of the Valentine's Day, that Aphrodite goddess is mentioned in different some places. Okay, because she is the goddess of love, sexuality, and war. She was very popular in Judah and Manasseh. Please take note of this person, Manasseh. I will refer to him again. Somehow, the prophecy of Jeremiah was, in a way, influenced by the pagan influence initiated or brought in by the by King Manasseh. Okay. So under Manasseh as the ruler of Judah, the worship of Ishtar or Astarte, together with many other Mesopotamian gods, became popular. I have given in bracket two references from the Second Kings, which will clearly show how Manasseh introduced the worship of the foreign god, Mesopotamian god in Israel. It's here that we come to this term, the Queen of Heaven. Okay, some of you might wonder, because even in the Christianity, the term is used. Of course, it is not anything to do with Astarte or Mesopotamian. The mother of God is given the title, the Queen of Heaven, which is originally, I don't say originally, there could be different variations of that. In Mesopotamia, this Astarte was known as the Queen of Heaven. Why is she known as the Queen of Heaven? Some translations, it is the host of heaven, because she was an astral divinity. Her cult took place in the open, on terraces. References are there. Incensing was common as part of the worship of this astral divinity, incensing. So these ancient cultures, ancient Near Eastern cultures, also Mesopotamian and probably Egyptian, or had this um, as part of the cultic practice, incensing. Okay. In such cases of the worship, the offerings were made to please the hosts of heaven, like stars, sun, and moon. And interestingly, the first writing prophet, Amos, mentions the name of two of the Assyrian astral deities when he accuses the people in Samaria, the northern kingdom, of becoming a prey to the influence of the astral Assyrian deities. Okay, that is Sakut and Kevan. Amos chapter 5:26. See, so what I'm saying, or what Jeremiah mentions, is not a strange statement. It was rampant in the culture of Israel. The cult consisted in making cake offerings, offering of cake. And there are archaeological excavations that prove that there were offerings made in the shape of a nude woman. It also consisted of drink offerings, libations. References are there in the Pentateuchal text. When you read I'm not sure, Jeremiah, Jeremiah 19:13, um, Jeremiah 19:13, that play the see, and the houses, I think I read it last time. Let me read once again. In the houses of Jerusalem, we are in 19:13 from the same prophet. And the houses of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah shall be defiled, like the place of Tophet. Okay, please hold on. In a few minutes' time, I will speak about this Tophet in the text that follows. All the houses upon whose roof offerings have been made to the whole host of heaven, and libations have been poured out to other gods. That's 1913. You could read yourself 32, 29. I'd given this passage already in the PPT of the previous class. Okay, 29, where, okay. The cult consisted of cake and drink offerings. Okay, we look into what is a real worship of the Queen of Heaven. It went against the first commandment, and that will also lead to the breach of others. I just referred to chapter 17, verse 18, the picture of children gathering sticks. And it's possible that it evokes an awareness of illegal Sabbath activities forbidden in the book of Numbers, chapter 15. Gathering sticks, children are forced to do that, as does the kindling of fires, Exodus 35. They are forbidden in the Pentateuchal traditions. And there, the whole family is engaged. Children gathering wood, the fathers kindle fire, and the women baking bread. Not allowed on the Sabbath. So the apostasy in family is not a light matter, because the consequence, the effect of this apostasy is found in the entire world of nature. That is in verse 20. My anger and my wrath shall be poured out on this place, on human beings, on animals, on trees of the field and fruit of the ground. It will burn and not be quenched. Friends, our truth that which Bible gives us, which has relevance to our own day, the sin committed has its social consequence, not only on the other human beings, the animals, the trees, and the fruits. We still have to just look at the world around. Recently, on the World Environment Day, people reflected. On Earth Day, people reflect. So there are international commemoration that make us reflect on this social responsibility, the deforestation and the abuse of the environment, jeopardizing the future of the entire universe, not just the human race alone. Okay. We just so that in 21 to okay, so the next session 21-28, the sacrifice and worship. Faith. Let me just see if I finished. Yeah, that's the previous slide. Okay, let me come back. Fine by me. We are moving to the next session, that is 21-28. The theme is faithfulness and not sacrifice that is required. Jeremiah now shifts the focus from the imported false cult of the Queen of Heaven, imported because they came from Mesopotamia through Egypt, to the abuse of indigenous Hebrew form of worship. Now the blame is directly on the Hebrew form of worship, that the form of worship associated with the burnt offerings and sacrifices. So this section is associated with the so-called cult polemic of the prophets. I'm not going to highlight once again, because already twice, thrice I have said, referring to the pre-exilic or the classical champions of social justice, prophets like Amos, Hosea, First Isaiah, Micah, and so on. So, here there are two parts. One, Yahweh speaks. That's 21-26. Then the prophet has to speak. So Yahweh speaks in verse 21-26, and he says, the most important duty of Israel is listening to Yahweh and not making burnt offering. I clarified this in the last class. So this is not a downright condemnation of all the exterior sacrifices and cultic offerings. No? But what is important, or primarily the primary function of an Israelite, is to listen to Yahweh, then make burnt offerings. You only have to, those who attended the Mass, the Holy Eucharist in the Latin Rite yesterday, the Gospel reading spoke about this. We are in the same theme. Listening, making burnt offering is only subservient to the real responsibility, listening to Yahweh. So that is the famous statement in 1 Samuel chapter 15-22. Samuel told Saul, the first king of Israel, obedience is better than sacrifice. The prophet is, Yahweh is telling the prophet, or rather Yahweh is telling the people, see, thus says the Lord of hosts, we are in verse 21. Add your burnt offerings to your sacrifices and eat the flesh. How do you understand this text? Add your burnt offerings to your sacrifices and eat the flesh. See, ordinary people were forbidden to eat the sacrificial offerings, except the book of Leviticus gives us the detailed indication, except the peace offering or shalom offerings, where as a sign of reconciliation between the deity, God, and the human being, part of the offering is shared with the priest, the people, and other things are burnt. And it's understood that the burnt offerings have reached to God. So God is sharing part of this peace offering with the people and the priest. But that is an exception. Others are sometimes burnt, all burnt, and they realize that the burnt offerings go directly to God, and God has accepted these offerings. Now the prophet, God through prophet is telling the people to eat all meat offered in the temple. Why? Because they are not authentic sacrifices, and God is not going to be pleased with these sacrifices. And it is as good as any food found in the restaurants anywhere, or the food that is cooked at home. It only has the same value. It has no sacredness, no sacrality, no sacred value, because these are sacrifices not accepted by Yahweh. So you eat it. Eat it. God is not going to accept it. It's because the people refused to listen to the prophets. And I would take you to a familiar prophetic phrase in verse 26. See, they did not listen to me, or pay attention, but they stiffened their necks. In many places, right from the time of the Exodus, accusation against the people of Israel, you stiff-necked people, or stiffen their necks. This is a vocabulary, a phrase repeated in Jeremiah and also in the book of Deuteronomy. Another typical expression in the book of Deuteronomy is hardness of the heart. Hardness of the heart. I suppose those who were familiar with the book of Deuteronomy will know this phrase very well, hardness of the heart. Sacrifice and worship, we are the same. The Israelite, we are in verse 23. There is a the Sinaitic formula. The origin of the Israelite nation. If I were to ask you, when did Israel as a nation originate? By now, you should be able to say, especially those who followed me with the book of Exodus. Israel as a nation. Israel as a nation originated on Mount Sinai, when God gave them the constitution, the Torah. Just like our nation here in India, we have the Republic Day, the day in which India became a nation, sovereign nation. That's a promulgation of the constitution, and with that it became one nation from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. So too, Israel, which was actually a league of different tribes that came out of Egypt, became one nation, united nation, one nation under Yahweh's rule. So, what does the prophet say? The origin of Israel took place in obedience to Yahweh, when God made them his own people. He said, "You shall be my people and I will be your God." Please, in your Bible, you can mark that in verse 23. Obey my voice. They obeyed his voice on Mount Sinai. And I will be your God. You shall be my people and walk only in the way that I command you, so that it may be well with you. Once again, if you are familiar with the book of Deuteronomy, this is typical Deuteronomic language, that you walk in the way of the Lord and everything will be fine with you. You may be, or it may be well with you. That is the Deuteronomistic principle in the entire chapter of Deuteronomy 28. We get that idea that fidelity to Israel will bring blessing. Fidelity to Yahweh, fidelity of Israel to Yahweh will bring blessing for Israel, and disobedience will bring curse. 27 to 28, verses 27-28, we find Yahweh's words to the prophet. This is actually a summary statement of what has been said so far. We'll just highlight those. First of all, people did not obey the voice of God. Second, they would not accept the divine instruction. Thus, for Jeremiah's preaching and prompting, he was met by deaf ears and hardened hearts. So verse 28 looks like an epitaph, that they are people with people beyond redemption. You shall, this is what we read out in the beginning of the class. You shall call to them, but they will not answer you. You shall say to them, this is the nation that did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, and did not accept a discipline. Truth has perished. It is cut off from their lips. Okay. 28 is actually something that looks like a epitaph, the last words. No more, do not waste your words on these people who are like beyond redemption. It's because now the next session, 29 to 34, it's about human sacrifices. This is very important, maybe very bizarre for the modern readers, but this is something that took place in Israel, and we will see what it is. Human sacrifices in the valley of slaughter. We are reaching now to the climax of the abuse, religious abuse in Israel. The religious abuses described reaches new depths in this passage. The terrible cult of child sacrifice. Just south of Jerusalem, in the steep-sided valley of Hinnom, remember this place, Hinnom, children were burned as sacrifices at a place called Tophet. In verse 32, you will see this 32, Tophet. I read right in the beginning, as I told you, I will speak to you soon about this, what the meaning of the place of called the Tophet. That is in chapter 19, verse 13. I read out to you. That is with regard to the worship of the Queen of Heaven on roof offerings with the wine or other drink, liquor. Um, the place is in the south of Jerusalem, the steep valley of Hinnom, a particular place called Tophet, where children were burned as sacrifices. Actually, Tophet got its name because of what it took place. The fireplace. This was the fireplace. 2 Kings 23:10. You are familiar with this. The valley of Hinnom. How it came into the New Testament. Originally, this valley is a valley in the south of Jerusalem where the waste, the rubbish of the city had been burnt. Um, so almost 24/7, every minute of the day and night, this place would be the fireplace, because the waste from the entire city would be brought in and burnt. So people would see this place constantly as a place of burning. So this is how, that's how it got the name Tophet, meaning fireplace. This Hinnom in Greek, in Hebrew is Gehinnom, and it was, when it was translated into Greek, it became Gehenna. Became Gehenna. Yesterday's gospel passage for the Mass in the Latin Rite yesterday from chapter 5 of Matthew, verse 22. So in the New Testament, this Gehenna becomes the synonym for hell. And that's why even in the time of Jesus, even when Jesus mentions about hell, there is a direct or indirect reference to the fire. And when Jesus spoke about Gehenna, the fire of Gehenna, okay, the valley of Hinnom, the fire, the city's waste would be burned continually. So the listeners of Jesus knew, because they are seeing that a place every day burning. They compared the fire in hell, to the fire that they were familiar with. Okay, that's how Tophet or Hinnom in Hebrew became Gehenna, and Gehenna is a synonym for hell in the New Testament. Looking at this place, Judah's sad descent into paganism, this Tophet or Gehenna became the place in which a child's life, the most precious of all divine gifts, was destroyed. So later, at the time of Jeremiah, Tophet or Hinnom Valley became a synonym for abuse or the murder of children, the most precious of all divine gifts. Okay, there are number of references to child sacrifices in the Bible. So it was not an exceptional thing that took place maybe once or twice. No, No. Remember in Genesis chapter 22, on Mount Moriah, Abraham was going up to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. We know the story. God forbade Abraham from killing the son Isaac. So many biblical scholars would say that was the end of the ancient practice of human sacrifice in the Hebrew society, because human sacrifice was common even today or in the recent times. In some of the very ancient aboriginal settings, human sacrifices still to take place because of superstitious beliefs. I given some references, Second Kings, many passages, and a sample from Second Chronicles. In the many of some of these Deuteronomistic history, books of Judges, even Judges, the story of daughter of Judge Jephthah, and he, because of a wrong oath that he made, he had to sacrifice. And so, although officially human sacrifice was stopped, maybe after Genesis chapter 28, the God substituting Isaac with a lamb. Unfortunately, this pagan practice continued. Even among the prophetic writers, when Ezekiel was aware of this, and he too accused the people of Israel, Jerusalem, of child sacrifices. I have given the references. And it is so serious that prophet gives in verse 29, the tragic substance of the narrative is given in that preface. Cut off your hair and throw it away. What meaning of this phrase? Cut off your hair. The traditional cutting off the hair from the head, or shaving the head completely, shaving the head from the head is a sign of mourning. In Jeremiah itself, several passages. As a sample, I have also given Micah chapter 1:16, shaving off the hair. I think even today in some traditional cultures, it takes place. I think in one of the old movies that I saw, the widows were forced to shave their hair, shave the head. That's in the chapter. So, what follows now is the devastation that took place. Devastation because of the heinous crime, the child sacrifices, which is terrifying. Okay, terrifying. When you read verse 33 to 34, numerous dead bodies. The corpses of these people will be food for the birds of the air, for the animals of the earth. No one will frighten them away, because they have to get the bodies cleared. We know those who are familiar with the situation of India a few weeks ago. Hundreds of bodies waiting to be buried and no place. This is just a picture from a scene in certain parts. Body waiting to cremate the body because there's no space in the crematoria. Okay, all of us know this. It's nothing new. Okay, I'm just trying to bring back the biblical text to our own times. So, what Jeremiah prophesied has its relevance even after, say, 2,600 years. Not that Jeremiah prophesied what would be taking place in 2021 in India. No, it's not that. I'm saying there is an association. Okay. So these bodies would be left for birds and animals as food. Very strange. Jerusalem and Judah will be condemned to become a wasteland. Judah and Jerusalem originally were meant to be the places for joy, mirth, and happiness. Remember the some of the text in the Isaiah where Jerusalem, Zion, is pictured as a bride. A lot of psalms. Jerusalem, the city, the streets of Jerusalem would be filled with the sound of joyful weddings. Sound of wedding, the voices of bride and groom. That was the original Jerusalem. Why this? The joy of the wedding party, the bride and groom is very much highlighted because the joy of wedding anticipates the birth of children. A nation that sacrificed its children forfeited all right from such cheerful occasions. You know, Jerusalem of ancient times. People would sing and dance, and they had several days of celebration after wedding. The entire city would join. At the time of Jeremiah, he's prophesying no more joy, no more singing, because the city will be first, there'll be dead bodies, no one even to bury. It will become food for animals and birds. Finally, it will become like a desolate waste. Those of us who read the contemporary history of some places in the world, some European countries, for example, where the birth rate is far below the required birth rate is far below the required birth rate for a nation to survive. There are no sound of children, just the aging population. The parks in the city are full of aging population. Hardly any sound of children. So, what Jeremiah spoke about a time in Jeremiah's time after the devastation by the invaders, where the children are no more there, could be a reflection of our own reality in different parts. Why? Because of not wanting to have children, blocking the birth of children into the world. Okay, so the message that Jeremiah preached, as or for that matter, the Bible has a scope which is everlasting, that lasts forever, which has a universal application. Okay, we conclude this chapter. with just one reference to verse 30, chapter 7, verse 30. I did mention that earlier. The sin of setting up abomination. The sin of setting up abomination in the house. I will take you to the historical situation I already mentioned in passing. During the reign of Manasseh, pagan idols were set up in the temple of Jerusalem. It was very common. The temple had been transformed. Also, place for the worship of the Canaanite gods. That happened at the time of Manasseh. According to the Deuteronomy's history, he was a wicked king. The Deuteronomic tradition, the Deuteronomic movement initiated by King Josiah, about which I said in 622, after the discovery of the part of today's book of Deuteronomy, he initiated the reform and removed all pagan idols from the temple in Jerusalem. Jeremiah initiates his ministry at the time of Josiah. Then why, when he exercises ministry at the end of 600, why is that he is accusing again? We have the reason. Yes, King Jehoiakim, who succeeded his father Josiah, reintroduced several of these pagan cults back in the temple. That's why this is mentioned once again. The sin of setting up abomination in the house that is called by my name, defiling it. Which is that place, which is that house called by my name, the temple in Jerusalem. And whenever you see the phrases like high places, right from the time of Samuel, or even the book Joshua, Judges, and so on, high places, you can immediately refer to the places in Israel allocated for the worship of Canaanite deities. Okay, so that is the meaning of the sin of setting up the abomination. We go to chapter 8. Although these first three verses will be part of previous chapter 7, and that's how we conclude. The astral worship, the worship of beings, heavenly bodies, worship of sun, moon, and stars. Here, something very strange. In the beginning of chapter 8, it's very strange. The bones of the kings of Judah, the bones of its officials, the bones of the priests, the bones of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be brought out of their tombs. The victims of disaster are not only those who are living and they will die, but those who had died long time ago because they had participated in the astral worship. Which is meaning, what do you mean by this astral worship? Worship of sun, moon, and the stars. While the corpses are piled up in Tophet, the punishment for human sacrifices offered there that we saw. Now the dead bodies of those who lived in the past are exhumed and spread all over the city and the land as dung. exposing them to heavenly hosts whom they worship during their life. It say that no heavenly body will help. During their lifetime, they worshipped foolishly. The prophet says it was a great sin, foolish sin, because they have no life. Yahweh has life. See, um, taking out the bones from the tombs was a Jewish custom at times to respect the dead, and they are not thrown out. Okay, not thrown out, not put into, not made like dung as Jeremiah mentions. They are preserved in ossuaries. Sorry, if you've gone to some of the great museums of the world, they have preserved these ossuaries where bones are preserved. Today, with the help of DNA test, we are able to find out the to whom those bones belong. Okay, so for Israel, preserving these bones in ossuaries was a sign of respect for the dead. But what is mentioned in verse 1 and 2 of chapter 8, dishonor and and humiliation of the dead, because these bones are not preserved in the ossuaries. They are used as a fertilizer. The ancient practice of using the animal bones as a form of fertilizer, as it is done even in the modern culture. Animal bones are wonderful fertilizer. So crushed up into bone ash, the broken down bones of Judah's nobility. We mentioned that when I read it. The bones of the officials, bones of the priests, bones of the prophets, bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and so on. So both the nobility and common people would provide, their bones would provide what? Phosphorus and other nutrients for the ground as manure, as a fertilizer. So the remnants who survive the disaster will lose all their desire to live. They would prefer death to life because they are intense suffering. They are see, there is an urge in a human being to survive, somehow to escape from death. But at this moment, when death has taken over all the living, and even the dead are humiliated, those remnants who have survived will lose any desire for living, no zest for life, because the intense suffering. Because when I say this, I am reminded of a particular family which there is only one person is surviving. The parents who were teachers, and first the father died of COVID, and the mother was recuperating, but she also died. And so there are a number of orphans in the country who probably have lost the hope of living. Okay, we go to the next session, chapter 8, 4 to chapter 10. It is another section, long section. Chapter 8, verse 4 to chapter 10, verse 25. Okay. Now, this section, with regard to substance, form, and origin, any reader will know that this is a collection of miscellaneous utterances. of different themes, not just one theme. Probably they were uttered by Jeremiah around 605 at different occasions. Later, the redactor or the editor or Baruch, the secretary, may have put together in this section. What do we see? The prophet sees a community nearing its doom. First of all, we see an unrepentant people and a group of unwise wise men. Unwise wise men from verses 4 to 12. From verse now we come back once again to the poetic form. Between we had an interlude of narrative. Now we go back to the poetic form. What are the things that are mentioned here? Just give a summary. The main theme is the persistent apostasy and misplaced values. There is a particular application to the religious leaders who are characterized by their stubborn refusal to repent. We get that in verses 4 to 6. Then their sense of religious superiority. They think they are wise, that's in verse 8. Their inordinate greed in verse 10. Verse 11, their superficial attention to the hurt of the people. And finally, utter lack of shame. That's what the section called the unrepentant people and unwise wise men. Okay. Okay. The indifference of Israel, the theme that we are dealing now, is also is again highlighted by Jeremiah in chapter 18, verses 13 to 17. So this the theme continues there in chapter 18. Now, very interesting if you read that. It says he takes us to the nature. Look at the nature. The birds follow their natural instinct. Think of the stork, the turtle dove, the swallow, or the crane. There is a natural pattern. But it says Israel, God's people, does not follow God's law. That famous theological term. They have forgotten God's law. Now, the prophet takes us to the migratory birds as examples. We are in verse 7. They mentioned the turtle dove, the swallow, and the crane. They observe the time of their coming. I was very much taken up many years ago when I went to the Ranganathitu bird sanctuary near Mysore. I was very much fascinated when the guide showed us certain migratory birds, saying that they have come from as far as Siberia, because where the birds, through their instinct, know that winter can be very terrible. So they have to, they know, without a radar system, without Wi-Fi connection, without any chip that is placed, without a remote control, remotely guided chips, without any of those, God has placed in them some order. So they come as far as Mysore. This is what that's how the guide explained. Uh, the birds coming from migratory birds coming from certain places. So, and when they know that the winter is getting over, how do they go to get the connect? How do they get the information? Mystery. How amazing is God's creation. Okay, they go back. So the prophet says these migratory birds follow a pattern. They know exactly where they should go, when they should return after going to the migratory land. In our case, for example, in Mysore, they follow a set pattern of life. However, Israelites have forgotten a life, they've forgotten a proper, orderly life. They do not feel the need of returning to God. Here there is a word play, but we need to know the Hebrew to understand that. The word shub, but all of you know the Hebrew word shub. Shub literally means to turn back, but theologically it means to convert, repentance. Verse 7 that you find is, or there's a parallel in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 3 in a different context. I have mentioned about that. Okay. From verse 8 to 9, from verses 8 to 9, Israel's rejection of the word of God. And here, the prophet attacks the spiritual leaders of the people. What we notice is a scathing attack on the spiritual leadership. They are referred to as the scribes, and the scribes are accused of falsifying the law, falsifying the law, falsifying the law. Could you give me? Falsifying the law, falsifying the law of the Lord with their copying pens. Okay. Scribes are accused of falsifying the law of the Lord with their copying pens. Verse 8. They say they are so arrogant, they are so self-conceit. They say we are wise and the law of the Lord is with us. When in fact, the false pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. The scribes are accused that wise men have ceased to be truly wise because they have rejected the word of the Lord. Lord or God is the only source of wisdom. That's with regard to wise men. The scribes who appeared, who claimed to be the wise people. What about the priests and prophets? They have abandoned the high calling of their office and devoted themselves to the pursuit of profit. That's in verse 10. And what's the doom? The doom of both the leaders and those led, leaders and the led and the people, is sure. The wise men will lose their wisdom to escape capture and punishment, while priests and prophets will experience the loss of their wives and fields to invading conquerors. So they are going to lose. Verse 13 to 17. we have the image of a sacked vineyard, threats against Judah. The image of the vine reappears because it has now become fruitless again. The panic stricken people before the invader, as panic stricken before the invader, the inhabitants of Judah seek temporary defense in their fortress, but there is no defense. There's a reference to the poisoned water in verse 14. The poisoned water refers to the cup of God's wrath. It is taken from many other passages in the Bible. The cup of God's wrath referred to as poisoned water. Even in Jeremiah elsewhere in chapter 9, 15, Psalm 75 verse 8, Numbers chapter 5, and so on. So the community on its way to death. Okay. Okay. The verse 13 of chapter 8 just referred to the sacked vineyard. See, when I wanted to gather them, says the Lord, there are no grapes on the vine, nor figs on the fig tree. Even the leaves are withered, and what I gave them has passed away from them. I'm speaking about the unfruitful vine or the fig tree. So Judah is fruitless. It has lost its fertility, and there is the failure of harvest in this section. Let me go to the next session. Okay, send the PPT in the PPT in the slides together with the PPT. In verse 18 to chapter 9, 1, it's that particular session. I just want to complete that. See, this is the lament of prophet during the famine. So he is highlighting the sufferings of his people due to famine and drought that we already saw in. Okay, look at chapter 8, verse 20. No, chapter 8, verse 20. The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. For the hurt of my poor people, I am hurt, I moan, and dismay has taken hold of me. Sorry. Okay. English. Okay. The prophet has sympathy for the people. The prophet has got sympathy for the people, although they have been sinful, and as a result, they have become fruitless. So the affection for his people is also highlighted in this section. So under the burden of the sufferings of the people, all over Judah are crying out in agony. That is what we find in the second part of verse 19. They cry out in agony. But Yahweh, the king, true king of Israel, unfortunately seems to be silent and non-active, and at times absent from Jerusalem because of the iniquities of the people. Okay, we have seen in different other sections, main problem is one is idolatry and the other is social injustice. Look at the end of verse 19. Why have they provoked me to anger with their images, with their foreign idols? So it is because of their infidelity. There is no cure for the ailment because God seems to be silent because of this. So now look at the heart of the prophet. Okay, the only option, and here we find the heart of Jeremiah. The only option left for the prophet in the midst of the disaster of the people is to weep continuously for the sufferings of his people. And it's here we call him as the weeping prophet. So only response for the prophet, because he himself feels helpless. So he weeps for the disaster. He weeps because of the suffering of the people. So he wishes that if his head were a perennial source of water, then his eyes would function like a fountain, pouring out tears incessantly, lamenting over the misery and the death of his people. Please, would you take chapter 9, verse 1? That is, you see the heart of Jeremiah. Chapter 9, verse 1. Oh, that my head were a spring of water, and my eyes a fountain of tears, so that I might weep day and night for the slain of my poor people. The places that are mentioned in this session, okay, that's in the verse, no, the balm of the balm in Gilead, that is in verse 22, chapter 8, verse 22, the balm in Gilead. Maybe I'll just make a mention of that. You know, the raisin from the styrax tree produced in the Trans-Jordan region of Gilead, they are used widely for medicinal purposes. We have seen that in Genesis chapter 46, 37 already. There are also for Jeremiah also will speak about in chapter 46 the balm in here. So he says there is my people are suffering. Can't be there, but even a bit of balm to soothe the suffering of my people, the pain of my people. Is there no physician there? Why then has the health of my poor people not been restored? That's as a conclusion. The prophet cries in chapter 9, verse 1. I will conclude this in tomorrow's class. The rest is the theme that is coming up constantly is, as I said, it's a miscellaneous or a mixture of different themes, and I will take it quickly in the coming class tomorrow. There are yeah some questions are here. I think I will just let you. Yeah, one question that is raised to me, that a question that I see in Catholic Church, Mary is addressed as Queen of Heaven. Is it in some way to snatch the converted Romans or Greeks from this Ishtar? Um, this okay, Ishtar and the worship of Astarte was very much prominent at the time of the prophets. Okay, and later, at the time of Jesus, for example, we don't hear about it. So it was probably not very popular, but different ways in different other cultures had it. Maybe like the form of the worship of Venus, etc. But this has nothing to do with that. Maybe the it's possible that the vocabularies would be prevalent in different cultures, but the same image is not used. The Christian theology takes it as a different, because with the church, for example, if Jesus is considered the King of the world, and so we have the feast of Christ the King, and after that we have the feast of the Queenship of Mary. So that is, of course, coming from some of the ancient Near Eastern idea. The Queen Mother is the most powerful person in the kingdom. So she is seated at the right hand of the king. King will ask for suggestions or seeks advice from the Queen Mother. So it was a very prominent place. So in the Catholic theology, if Jesus is seated, Jesus is the King of the universe. Yes, Mother is. He concerns, of course, Mother symbol is used. Let me. Okay, there is some typing error. I will correct that. Yes. Is there any tradition Christianity to cut off the hair? Uh, there are some local customs, local cultures, local custom, um, because and it has come to certain places in churches because of the local custom, not because of official custom anywhere written down. That is based on the local custom. For example, I know in Velankandi Shrine of Velankandi, devotees make a vow to shave off the head. So it is nothing official, nothing official. Some private devotion. Some other question that is asked to me is Ishtar still being worshipped in our modern times? Not as Ishtar. No? I think extra or excess devotion to even the secular world, sex, or luxurious things, as in the form of modern day Venus, etc., worship of, they could be considered as a modernized version of the worship of Ishtar. Another question, maybe last question, I think it's almost time. Josiah was the father of Jehoiakim. So why is it that a son cannot see or follow what his father did? Okay, we know even our own experience in modern time, the families, parents could be very, very pious and devoted, and they are the embodiment of God's rule. But children can be perverted, or vice versa. Sometimes the parents can be without responsibility. Sometimes children, the holiness of children will sometimes convert the parents. Okay, they are part of. So we conclude today's class. Thank you for being with us. Tomorrow I will complete this section and move to possible to the next one, because the repeated themes I will not take now, because you are already getting the idea. I have mentioned that two important accusations against Israel. One is the idolatry in different forms. Other is a social injustice. So whenever there is a repetition of this, I will quickly move over unless somebody else will ask me the question. So we will go to the most important aspect of the remaining parts of the prophetic message of Jeremiah. So let's conclude this day. Um, Let us glorify the Trinity. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Amen. Have a wonderful evening. See you tomorrow.